It's Hexy. I wasn't going to shoot a video so soon for the second part of Gettysburg 77 Advanced, but this is kind of interesting or kind of intriguing here. So, Heth, 3 brigades aggressive, and because of his control limit, he's been able to work Archer, Davis, and Brockenbrough. Pettigrew, since he's in battle line formation now in the back here, he has to roll for activity on his own. If he was in column formation or rest, he wouldn't. He could fall under Heth. But Heth can only control 3 units that are in battle line formation. And quite frankly, that's all he's needed. So unless there's, I'm not using the optional rules, and I don't know. I don't see anything on. I see cavalry charges, but I don't see anything on like cavalry. We know that Buford fought a delaying action, falling back until First Corps arrived. I don't really see a rule that applies to that. You have what's called attack and retreat movement. So while I understand the concept of what that is, that battle lines and artillery, they present a range of influence. And movement changes for the phasing player when he hits or goes to enter an enemy range of influence. Now, artillery, if they have rifled cannons, they have a range of influence of about to 8 hexes. Unfortunately, Caleb's battery was overrun because, like I say, there's just no real retreat before assault or anything in this thing. So Caleb's battery got overrun and taken, which was actually pretty simple in that he was taken. And Devon and Gamble, if I pull their chart up here, you can see the strengths that they started with, 16 and 12, and they're down to 7 and 5. They've taken 94 casualty points, which equivalates to 9 strength point losses, and 72 for Devon, which equivalates to 7 losses. And their disorganization levels are at 11, okay? About to go to 12. Now, there's no markers for that, but once you get over 4 in your disorganization level, you can no longer be named to attack. So you cannot get in there in advance, okay? So they have fought all the way back to Seminary Ridge, and they've been pushed off of Seminary Ridge by Heth, who really, Heth, we look at his losses, and the cavalry is doubled when they fire. Union cavalry is doubled. And you can see Heth, and I think I got to check that because the Davis counter says 24 strength points. And I want to say Davis's regiment was a large, or brigade was a large brigade, and I wonder if that's just a misprint on this sheet because the counter says 24. But they've only lost 4 casualty points, okay? And their disorganization levels are at 2. Brockenbrough his disorganization points are at 3, so his disorganization level is unaffected yet. He's still at 0. And your disorganization level affects your experience level. So when you do fire combat or you do close assault, that experience level is big. And these Confederate brigades running up on this cavalry and getting in close with them, they're coming in there when you do an assault. Granted, you're doing it with only 1 brigade formation against, so like 1 brigade, even though this is the whole brigade right here, you're doing the assault 1-to-1. All right. And then whatever that result is, these 2 hexes here are both the same brigade of Gamble. If they get a retreat, that the whole brigade retreats. And depending on what's left in front of them, the entire attacking brigade, even though these guys didn't exactly get in here and close assault in the means of how you determine the close assault, they all get to advance. So that's interesting. The concept is kind of cool. But I don't like the fact that there's no real option to retreat, especially with the cavalry. being able to jump on their horses and get out of there. So, like I say, unless I've just completely missed it, I'll tell you what, I'm going to show you the highlight on my rule book for this. You can see it's like almost everything I've highlighted. Everything is an important rule. So this is an older game, so everything in there is vital. There's a lot of blank spots in here, but for most of it, I've been able to just common sense work through it. But this is definitely not the July 1st that happened historically. And that cavalry, I mean, they're completely, in my opinion, they're shattered. So, but Meredith and Cutler are here. So the Iron Brigade and the 2nd Brigade, 1st Division, 1st Corps is on the field. Reynolds is there, and it's about to start the Union turn. Now these guys here, it's going to take all of their activity, if they only use 6, to get out of column and into battle line, which means they're probably not going to move unless we want to use 8 activation points, 8 activation points that a commander can use if I name Wadsworth as the primary commander, and then they'll be able to change into battle line, and then they'll still have 2 activity points left to move, which means they might be able to move 1 hex. Can't leave them in column. They got to come out, because if they get hit while they're in column. And Heth, like I say, his 3 front brigades are still in great shape, and Pettigrew is still considered fresh. He hasn't done anything yet. So this is going to get interesting, to say the least. Like I say, I got to get by this understanding this range of influence thing with, I understand once a combat unit's moved into the firing range of an element, whether it's artillery or whether it's infantry or whatever, that they became a little slower in movement, a little more cautious maybe. There's no just charge, but once you get into that range of influence of an enemy unit, your movement guidelines are completely changed. Like moving 1 hex or spending 1 point to move on a road now becomes 2. Spending 1.5 to move on a non-road becomes 2. All right, and you have to use. Well, they got a rule that says you must use 6 AP, but I think that's a little confusing once you're in there. And you have to be named to attack in order to advance adjacent to an enemy unit. Well, okay, so all 3 of Heth's brigades are that are up there in the front have been able to be named to attack, and they have been in the cavalry's face from the moment they got in there up until now. They've been in an attack mode, and they've not been driven out of it. They've not been retreated out of it. Buford's cavalry is now in a retreat mode. So this movement coming up, if they don't get out of the range of influence of the Confederates here, which is 3 hexes, applying line of sight too, then they're going to suffer some more disorganization points. And really, they've got a ton of recovering that they're going to need to do. And you can recover it. But his strengths have been cut in half. I mean, more than half. So he's got to get out of there. Like I say, 1st Division, the 1st Corps is now on the field. There's some artillery coming up the road from Emmitsburg. And I believe the Union are going to start getting a few more reinforcements here shortly. So now I'm curious. I'm really curious as to how this is going to play out by the end of the first day, when Union forces, there's a big, if I remember right, at the actual historical timetable, that there's a big gap where Union reinforcements stop coming on, and the Confederate numbers are just overwhelming. So that's going to be interesting to see if I can get to that point where you've got Heth, Pender, Rhodes, and Early. And I got a feeling that if Heth has the ability to command 3 battle lines, what Ewell or what Early and Rhodes and Pender are going to be able to control, or maybe even what Ewell himself or AP Hill, when they come on, what they can control, because you can use Corps commanders to do this too. So this is going to get interesting, and I'm curious, because it's probably not going to be another. We're starting the 9:20 turn here in a moment, and I think 20 more minutes after that, Pender's going to arrive. And, of course, following that's going to be Rhodes and then Early. Events are going to, I think, by around 1 o'clock are going to be on the map. So, all right, so this is interesting. This is keeping my attention because it's so different than any any Civil War or any black powder game I've ever played. Not hating it. Little confused with the way some of the rules are because there's so much detail in these rules, and there's some blank spots. And I'm you know how it is when you play a detailed game. You're going to have a little white spot or a blank spot that you just missed something. And then a couple turns, you'll come across that. Okay, you'll pick up that blank spot, but then there's going to be another one, and then eventually you'll pick that one up. But you're always going to have something that you're going back to look for, and maybe you don't find the explanation. This rule book's not written like the rule books are today. So, with an index and stuff like that. But like I say, I'm still intrigued and still interested with this. I got to admit, I'm having fun, even though it's just very, beautiful map, obviously. But the counters are very hard to read. I got my magnifying glass sitting here beside me to help with that. And then you're doing a lot of paperwork on the charts. So you're not extremely severe, but it's enough. And then you've got a lot of tables you're using to do fire combat, to do assault and stuff like that. And the biggest thing you got to pay attention to is the disorganization level and using that to determine a unit's experience, because that's an interesting system in itself, where your disorganization level is compared against your base experience, which for the units it'll be a color on the back of the command unit. Like he's a blue. I'm sorry. Like Meredith there is a blue, the Iron Brigade, and a blue is a veteran unit. That's the best you can get, and then you use that based with experience or disorganization to figure out what their actual current experience is when they go into combat, when they fire, or when they are close assaulting. All right, anyhow, this is like a phase 2 for Gettysburg 77 Advanced. Wanted to shoot this just to show the development, and I got a feeling maybe this will change a little bit now with the 1st Division on the map. And if something does, I'll post back up. Talk to you soon. Hope to see a bunch of y'all up at Gettysburg starting this weekend for the whole week. Play some GBACW or some GCACW, or just to shoot the shit with each other. I'm so looking forward to meeting a bunch of you people out there that are coming. All right, we'll talk to y'all soon.